Welcome back to Say No to Lashon Hara, Day 75. This entire series is being done as a zechut for the continued health for Chana Bat Simcha Fega. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please contact us at shlomo@wearechazak.com. The Chafetz Chaim gives another example here where a person's praise can actually turn to become negative for the person they're praising. If a person says that someone did the most amazing act of generosity or kindness to them, you don't know, I went to this person's house and they sat me down and fed me a meal like a king. Or a person will say, this man, he gave me a loan right when I needed it. I was able to put down a down payment. I was able to buy a car. And it sounds like you're just showing your gratitude and praising the person. However, the person that are listening or the people that are listening might wind up saying to themselves, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to go knock on his door right now and ask for a meal myself. Or I'm going to go and ask him for a loan. And what will happen is the person will become inundated by people, good people and bad people perhaps, who are coming to take advantage of this generosity that you described to them. That might hurt him in the long run. He may have to give out more money than he intended to, or lose some of that money to people that are not necessarily so honest. Or he might be forced now to host people even in times where it's not so easy for him. The Chafetz Chaim continues and says that when a person discovers that there are people around him that are always speaking Lashon Hara, he explains that a person is not allowed to live amongst those people. What a fascinating statement. You're not even allowed to sit with such people, even if you don't want to listen to their conversations, because the mere act of sitting seems to indicate that this is my clan, this is who I am with. He carries on and explains that if you have a Torah teacher that sees that you have who has a student, and that student is a serious Ba'al Lashon Hara, they are constantly speaking Lashon Hara. If the teacher feels that there's no way for him to communicate to the student how important the laws of Lashon Hara are, and to get him to change and to inspire him for growth, he has an obligation to stop teaching Torah to that person. Obviously, we're talking about a case where the student is an adult. But what an unbelievable statement that is. The Chafetz Chaim continues and says that if by mistake or by accident a person finds themselves in the company of Ba'alei Lashon Hara, imagine a scenario where someone is on a bus or a train and people around them are speaking Lashon Hara. So he didn't intend to sit there, he doesn't live there, but he's kind of stuck there. He has an obligation to give them tochacha, to rebuke them, and ask them to stop in the middle of this Lashon Hara conversation. However, says the Chafetz Chaim, interestingly enough, what happens if I know that rebuking them or telling them to stop actually causes them to increase Lashon Hara? Then the rebuke actually has the exact opposite effect that you want it to have, and the person should not give that rebuke. The Chafetz Chaim kind of slices a hair here and says that what happens if the rebuke that you're going to give, it might stop the Lashon Hara, it might not, but it will definitely not cause it to increase. So in other words, if I know Lashon Hara won't get worse, but it might work and it might not. In a case where you're unsure about the success, a person is obligated to rebuke because maybe it will help. If he's worried that it will increase the Lashon Hara, as we said earlier, then he should not. The halakha tells us that when a person is giving tochacha, they kind of sometimes feel embarrassed. It feels like, or it looks like you're feeling high and mighty when you do it. And people don't often like to give rebuke. Says the Chafetz Chaim, if I don't give rebuke, I am also part of the crime. I sat there listening to Lashon Hara, and by my mere presence, I actually emboldened the Ba'al Lashon Hara, and the others also think to themselves, it must be true. So-and-so was sitting right there and he didn't say anything. And he's an upstanding person. So in turn, when a person doesn't rebuke, they also become part of the Isur of Lashon Hara. What happens when I don't think I'll be able to rebuke? Like we said earlier, what if I think it will cause more Lashon Hara to be said? So what should I do? Says the Chafetz Chaim, figure out a way to change the topic. Now, that sounds like an impossible thing to do. We're in the middle of talking some juicy Lashon Hara about someone, I can't rebuke them because it might cause more Lashon Hara. So what should I do? Change the topic. Who's going to want to change the topic? Well, actually, it's quite easy. And people who have tried it will actually testify that it works much more than you might think it will. I would like to add that if that was true about the Chafetz Chaim's generation, imagine an ADHD generation, how much more so that's true. People are talking about somebody in the shul, in the community, and then all of a sudden someone will say, oh my gosh, I went to this amazing restaurant. We all have to go there. The food was so delicious. Suddenly everyone's changed the topic and we're all talking about food. So especially in a generation like ours, when a person doesn't feel that they can rebuke, oftentimes they'll be very successful at changing the topic, and through that got the entire group to stop speaking Lashon Hara. The second way to respond to this is by actually standing up for the person that's having Lashon Hara being spoken about them. So if you don't think anyone's going to listen if you tell them to stop speaking Lashon Hara, or you're not allowed to do this, you can actually challenge Lashon Hara that's being said. Well, actually, as an example, I know this person, and I know them personally, and I know that they would never do something like that. I know that you heard somebody say that, but I know him personally firsthand, and what you're saying is not true. There, the rebuke is not necessary. You basically cast the doubt in everybody's mind who was listening by saying that you know the person personally, and that person is only guessing or hearsay or responding to some form of a rumor. So that's another way of combating Lashon Hara when you're sitting there and don't feel like you have the opportunity to give direct rebuke.